Another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Trial by Stone!
This is what I came for.
Your vital essence, the Dark Crystal.
I can feel something. Hear it almost.
Don't move.
Don't move? Where would I go?
Quiet!
Here's your host, Philip Mitchell. Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone. This is your vital essence on all things the Dark Crystal. I'm your host, Philip Mitchell, and I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. This is part 2 of the chat that I had with J.M. Lee, the author of Tides of the Dark Crystal, and as well as one of the many writing team for the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, which is very awesome. And, you know, it's such an exciting time to be a fan of the Dark Crystal, you know, especially this year. I mean, not only with Age of Resistance, but Joe's final sort of book in his 4-book series, Flames of the Dark Crystal, is due to be released in July, which is really, really cool. And I'm sure there'll probably be a couple other surprises in store for us. Just have to wait and see. If you haven't listened to the previous episode, I would, highly recommend you give that a listen because, just to follow along with our conversation that we had. And this is part 2 of the podcast, which is a spoiler discussion kind of episode. So if you haven't read Tides of the Dark Crystal or even the other Dark Crystal books, I'd highly recommend to, give them all a read with Shadows of the Dark Crystal, Song of the Dark Crystal, and of course, Tides of the Dark Crystal, as we go deep into Tides of the Dark Crystal and so much more. And also we do reveal which character's point of view will be in Flames of the Dark Crystal. So sit back, relax, and let's go back to the Podling Village to continue my discussion with Joe. I know, with this book, you've introduced a couple of new concepts, sort of to dream fasting, with far dreaming, and I think, I'll probably will say this now. So we'll probably go a little bit deep into the spoiler section. So, for any of the listeners that haven't read Tides of the Dark Crystal or any of the previous books, I highly recommend, you check them all out and give them all a read, as we sort of, as we're going to get probably a bit deeper now into, the things that occur in books, in Tides of the Dark Crystal. So I just sort of want to put that out there. So of course, we're far dreaming and dream space. And so, with far dreaming, that's pretty much, that one of the characters, I think Onikar, is able to do this far dreaming, just sort of seeing the visions of the future, that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to sort of explore and develop is without being too academic about it, I suppose, is what is dream fasting? Why does it happen? What is the mechanism? And so without just being we're going to go to dream fasting school and learn all about dream fasting, I kind of like to sort of push dream fasting in a little bit in this direction or a little bit in this direction. So with Naya, for example, she can dream fast with things that are not Gelfling, right?
Yeah,
so
like the animals.
Yep. So she can dream
And
fast
a tree.
with yep. So that's one thing. Does it always have to be with Gelfling? Well, maybe not necessarily, but maybe only in special cases, And so with Annika's far dreaming, one of the things I was thinking about was well, if we think of time not as linear, is there a reason why we can't dream fast with a future version of ourselves? You
Yeah.
know, like is that possible? And so there is a scene pretty early on in the book where they meet with Annika, who is one of Tavra's friends, and they sort of ask her like, "Well, what should we do?" And she says, "Well, maybe we should try to see if Thra can give us these answers." And so in a way, they're dream fasting into the future, but in another way, I like the idea that maybe, Thra and the crystal are bigger and more far seeing than the Gelfling are, right? So most of the far dreaming is actually just in geographical distance. So they're able to see things that happened far away from them. And then there's sort of a breakthrough vision that they receive at the end of this session that sort of seems to exist in the future. And so all of those things are just sort of me exploring what this special Gelfling talent is and how can it be a little bit different or a little bit special, or what are its limitations. Yeah, so that's kind of where I was coming from that. And the dream space is also sort of a part of that, where it's me thinking about, like I love in the original film when Jen and Kira dream fast for the first time, there's this visual mechanism that we're using to see how they're seeing each other's memories, and trying to think of that in terms of like my personal experience or the experience of others. I don't know if you've ever had a psychic experience before, but there's definitely there's a feeling of like a presence or like an alternate vibration or an alternate plane in a way. And so to like imagine it as being a space where these Gelfling minds can sort of interact with each other, like is this happening in a like a abstract place? And place is a very generic term, right? Like it's not like obviously a physical place, but just sort of developing what that looks like, what it feels like, and sort of saying, it's not just Gelfling telepathically shooting each other memories, but like this is something very big. This is a gift that was given to us by Thra, and Thra is speaking to us, and Thra is allowing us to speak to each other through it in a way. And what does that all mean? And kind of how does that help us in a way, right? And how does that help us reach our own potential? Like, who are we as Gelfling? I guess it's a lot of questions that are all sort of introduced in Tides, and I would say a bit refined in Tides, and then explored more fully in the fourth book, Flames of the Dark Crystal.
Yes, yeah. And of course, with Dream Space, that was something that, described in the book as sort of the world within our world, the source of magic and prophecy, and was something of Olgra's creation in that regard. So, yeah. It was really, really interesting, abstract sort of, ideas of, just expanding the dream fasting, that we've been seeing over the course of the couple of books, and just going above and beyond, with all these new
Right.
ideas, which has been really cool. Yeah. And I mean, that was a big thing, like, I think it was in chapter 4, sort of the big really twist of, of the Chamberlain,
Right.
pretty
Yep.
much drinking the essence of Mira. And, that was sort of the big part of, all these books of, having that as the evidence. And then all of a
Right.
sudden that sort of evidence is all gone, and that was one of the point. Yeah, I think when I talked earlier is one of the parts where I put the book down and just thinking, wow, that changes everything
and I
a little bit.
think one of the things that's difficult about writing a prequel is that we all know the film, and so it's been an adventure, trying to I mean, like, you know,
Yeah.
when you're writing fiction, you have to make sure that the stakes stay high, right? So Rian has this vial of essence, and we know that's the proof, right? We know that if he shows that to the All Madra, we know that she'll
Yes,
believe
yeah.
us because she can see the proof. And it's like, well, what would happen if you didn't have that anymore, you know? And so there's a lot of those moments where the Gelfling, I think, take a lot for granted, and they don't even really know. Like they're kind of innocent, right, and naive in a lot of ways, and sort of it hurts, but in a lot of ways, like watching them stumble and fumble, so that they can no longer rely on the Skeksis to help pick them up anymore, right? So really making like a situation where these young characters, especially young characters, right, have to deal with the real consequences of what the Skeksis are doing, and really see for themselves, but where nobody else can see that this has happened, just like how ready the Skeksis are to turn on the Gelfling. Um, so yeah, I mean, like that was definitely, there's a lot of those moments. There's more of those moments in Flames, and you know, nothing is, especially when it's something huge like this, it's not easy. And yeah, I mean, as a writer, I take delight to a certain extent in writing those scenes,
Yeah.
because if you can surprise
Yeah.
people, that's, you know, that's good. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it happened especially with book two. I mean, the whole, you know, with Tavra being you know,
right.
or controlled by a spider, with Krychek, and that whole sort of transformation, you know, having the mind of Tavra, you know, put into the body of the spider, you know, for her to sort of continue
Right.
to sort of, you know, to live on. That was like a big, you know, yeah, one of those big,
Well, I
yeah,
think I mentioned too, I mean, like, especially with the Dark Crystal, this is supposed to be like different, right? We're supposed to be exploring just sort of strange things. And when I originally wrote the outline with Tafra, I was like, I don't know if anybody else is going to go for this, but
yeah,
I'm going to try
yeah,
it, you know. And everybody was like, this is so
yeah,
weird and so good. So, whenever, you know, there's always these moments where I'm writing, I'm like, well, I could do this, or I could do this really bizarre
yeah,
thing. We'll just try it, you
yeah.
know. And inevitably, it's the really strange stuff that's sort of like, you know, ends up being some of my favorite.
Yeah, and memorable in some way, you know, because it's like, you know, just the moments you just don't think about, and it, you know, yeah, especially, you know, with her being, you know, the spider, and then and with chapter 4, you know, with the Chamberlain drinking, you know, the essence of, you know, of Mira, who of course is, you know, Rand's sort of love interest in a way, was sort of very devastating for him, um, and
Well, it
yeah,
was like it was for the second time, right? Like in book two, we find out that he saw her get drained from when he dreamed fast with Kylan, and so he went through that at that time, and then to see it again, you know, is very traumatic. But in another way too, I think that, you know, there's always this question, oh, you're writing YA, you know, is it for what is the age? You know, how old is the reader who's reading these books? And one of the things that I don't think that the original film didn't pull its punches. I mean,
mm.
there's some pretty disturbing
Oh yeah,
stuff in
yeah,
there, and as we'll all agree.
oh yeah, definitely, yeah, yeah.
uh, and you know, I mean, so scenes like that are also like important, I think, because it's establishing, you know, there are real costs in this world, and the Skeksis are, they're kind of funny sometimes, but like not all the time, and actually most of the time they're pretty scary, and when they want to get you, like they're not gonna pause. So yeah.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, you know, when I was like, I've actually just started reading the novelization. It's been one of those things I've been meaning to read for such a long time, and I'm, you know, this year I'm going to get deep into it. You know, this year to you know, to read that on top of, you know, with World of the Dark Crystal as well. That's another book I've been meaning to read, but I always get distracted by the pictures every time I open up the book. I'm like, oh wait, I'm meant to read this as well. So that's one of those things I'm gonna, you know, definitely do this year, and even like, you know, in the novelization, that, yeah, I mean, especially like with Skektek, for example, he's just really like, you know, disturbing, like, you know, not only, you know, that we see with Gelfling essence and stuff, but, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, he does, you know, besides those things. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of disturbing.
Yeah. Yep. There are definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, that's all you can say. I agree. But yeah, I mean, like I said, like I really liked all the twists, and of course, you know, one of the big things I think that you're sort of able to do is introduce Bria into the story with Tides of the Dark Crystal. So how's that been like, sort of, you know, being able to incorporate, you know, all these pieces, you know, that, you know, will, you know, eventually lead on with Age of Resistance, you know, with incorporating like her character.
It's fun. I mean, like one of the things that I really love doing with the books is to add Easter eggs, you know. And so what was fascinating is that I did not know, when I knew obviously that Brea had been mentioned in Tides of the Dark Crystal because I wrote it, but
Yes, yeah.
I did not know that the announcement about the series was going to be so close to the book coming out.
Oh yes, yeah, that too, yeah.
So when the announcement came out, I was like, oh man, people are gonna,
Yeah.
now that the announcement is out, they're gonna log these 3 names, the only 3 names that they have given.
Yeah.
And when they read the book in like whatever chapter it is, 4 or 5, people are gonna recognize her name. So that was very exciting, actually. I was like, okay, because otherwise, you know, so basically, for the context, there's this dream fasting sequence, and Tavra sees her sisters talking to her mother, the Almadra. One of the sisters is Brea, and so it's this scene that's more about Tavra and more about the state of the Gelfling at that time. But because the Age of Resistance announcement happened like a week, I think, week and a half before the book came out, I was like, this is great. Now people will like they'll clock that name, right?
Yeah.
So that was really fun, actually. That was something that I didn't expect, but that I think was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, you could have been in a situation where it's like, yeah, they didn't announce anything, and then it's like, you know, that readers just happened to come across Brea, you know, while reading the book, you know, when the show's out. But it was kind of cool to actually, you know, sort of have a sort of, you know,
the timing was great.
Yeah, just the timing. Yeah, and just knowing who, you know, Brea is, and then we can backtrack and like, oh, okay, that was pretty cool. So
right,
yeah,
absolutely.
So and of course, you know, yeah, a lot of fans, you know, we're just so excited to see, you know, all these adventures of Ryan, Brea, and Deet, and but, you know, we'll definitely, I mean, probably one of the other things is, you know, going to get into more spoilery now, which I mean, was about the death of the old Mordra, Mayen. Like for me, that was another big surprise that sort of happened, and sort of like, I mean, when you make decisions about, you know, who lives or who dies and all that kind of stuff, like how do you decide about all that? Was that something that, you know, you sort of thought, you know, to do this, to sort of, you know, can, you know, expand the story about now that the old Mordra's part, you know, has died, and you know, just another drastic change, I guess, with the Gelfling clans, or, you know, especially with, you know, the vapor of, you know, of Hurrah,
right,
and all that. Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, I always knew that book 3 was going to be the book where, like, you know, crap hits the fan, right? Like, this is the book where, like, it gets real here. And through book 1 and book 2 and even book 3, it is Naya and her friends' goal. They're like, if we can just get to the Almadra, she'll just fix this. It'll be fine. We'll get to her. We'll show her the vial. Okay, the vial's gone, but you know what? We still have each other. Yeah. We still have our memories. We're just gonna we just gotta keep going. We'll get to the Almadra, and she'll fix our problems, right? So, like, there's that expectation that it'll just be fine. And I think that one of the things about this story is that in a lot of ways it's like not fine, right? No. So it was very important to me in, you know, every iteration from the very beginning that, you know, sort of that safety net gets steadily and surely removed from these young characters who really have to, I mean, this is about change. This is about revolution in a lot of ways, right? How how do we change the way that we have been for thousands of trying? And so that moment is I mean, there's plenty of Game of Thrones moments like that, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, almost every episode has got something that goes down. It's like, oh god.
Right.
Yeah.
It's especially since it's been their goal for so long. Well, first of all, if she hadn't died, what would have happened? Where would that story have gone? And so that's just one of those things where it's like, nope, you need to figure this out. Things have to change. Things must change, or else this will keep happening. That was just sort of that sobering moment. And I mean, like, as far as when you ask, like, why do you, how do you choose which characters have to die? And there's this joke in the YA community, well, you have to kill all of the adults so that the teenagers have to solve their own problems. So true.
Yeah. So is, yeah. But also it's I mean, I guess that's the thing, you don't want the whole story to be a bit predictable, I guess, that was sort of leading into, books 1 and 2, that the whole thing was, getting to Harara and telling the All-Maudra. And so, having them reaching to Harara and, not be able to make it in time, essentially, just, it's like such a drastic change into the story. And I think that was just really interesting. And I think, it's just more interesting. Yeah. I mean, with, Celadonna, one of the sisters, Bria's sister, or, the daughter of the All-Maudra, sort of taking place, and now, she sort of sides with the Skeksis a lot more, and Bria doesn't. And, so sort of like that sort of dynamic that, just adds another level,
right. Well, as well with Tavra, right? So Tavra's sister is Bria and Celadon, and then Tavra is the daughter of the All-Maudra, which has been sort of, I imagined, I really liked also how Tavra's character was affected by sort of what went down. And one of my favorite moments in the books is kind of near the end, where Naya is like, well, Tavra, you should be the All-Maudra. Yeah, of course. But then, things have happened to Tavra that kind of make that difficult, and sort of this idea that, like, well, it's sort of that yearning feeling of, like, I wish I could fix these things, but they just feel so overwhelming that I don't even know how to start that in a way. And that's sort of the feeling of, like, when things start to change and your safety net gets, the rug is pulled out from under you, and sort of where do you go? And then it kind of causes the characters to really reach inside themselves and find their inner strength, that they can get through it. They can do it. They can endure. They can, resist.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as we sort of get to, with the end of book 3, sort of actually sort of ends in a bit of a sort of a cliffhanger. Like, I know, like, the first
like
two books. Yeah. I mean, the first 2 books sort of, they always had sort of, sort of a bit of closure in some regard. But I mean, the end of the third one, with all our sort of main heroes stuck inside Skeksa's big ship with Skeksa, and though, I mean, of course, Naya has somehow escaped and all that kind of stuff. So I just can't, after getting to the end of the book, I was just like, I just can't wait to see what happens next.
You don't have to wait a full year for the next one.
Yes, of course, yeah. Which with Flames of the Dark Crystal is due to be released, I think, July the 23rd of this year. So yeah, it's not too long of a wait.
Yep.
And I mean, how's everything been going? Like with book 4, like, for you? Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, it seemed like I would never get to the point where I was working on this book, and it definitely never felt like I would ever get to the point where I had finished the manuscript, trying not to psych myself out, because that doesn't help anybody. But there's definitely stuff, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where you're like, all right, well, I got to make a list of all of the things that I have, like, all these questions that I've asked, and make sure that, and sort of make sure that, it's a good book by itself, make sure that, it's fun and it has the same tone, but at the same time, the stakes are higher. these characters have changed a lot, and sort of just to make sure that I follow through. But yeah, I actually, when I finished the book 4 manuscript, I looked at it and I was like, I feel really good about this.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Which normally when I finish a manuscript, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, honestly. And then you revise, and then you revise, and you revise. I'm like, oh, okay, now it's fine. But yeah, I finished the 4th manuscript, and I felt pretty good about it. So I can only hope that means that by the time, the revisions are all locked down, that it is the finale that I wanted to write and that people want to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm very excited just to get into Flames of the Dark Crystal when it comes out, and of course being able to chat to you again
Absolutely.
on Flames, and I'm sure I'll be chatting to you again once Age of Resistance is out, because I know there'd be so many stories that we could talk about with the show and behind the scenes stuff and all that kind of thing. So I mean, is there anything that you can reveal about book 4? I mean, probably one of the things I'm really curious about is, of course, in each book you've had a point of view of each characters. As I said early in the show, with Naya, Kylan, Anne-Marie, and I mean, is that something you're able to reveal a bit? Who will be the point of view for Flames of the Dark Crystal?
Yes, actually, book 4 is from Naya's perspective, so I'm really excited to go back to. It's definitely a sort of a book about trying to go home, trying to go back to where you came from, and finding out that things have really, really changed. And so Naya, we haven't read from her perspective since book 1, and she has changed a lot in the books 2 and book 3. So I really, really love who she has become, and then who we get to see her grow into by kind of the finale of book 4. So really excited to share that. And I've really fallen in love with all the characters, and it's just been a really a fun experience as far as writing and kind of re-experiencing this in the finale, to kind of, in a lot of ways, revisit things that that we saw in book 1, but to see them and how they have changed and how the world really has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, the story sort of started with her in a way, so I guess it makes you make sense of going back to her point of view of the story. And to wrap up, your book series of books that you've been working on for a very long time, for 5 years almost.
Right.
It's been quite a journey, and I just for myself, I just can't wait to read the 4th book, and I think 2019 is just going to be an amazing year for the Dark Crystal.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Yep, there's going to be so much stuff. That's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joe, I just want to say thank you so much for coming back on the show to chat about Tides of the Dark Crystal. How can listeners find more about yourself, online or whatnot? Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I'm most active on, recently I've been working, so my Twitter's been pretty quiet. But you can visit me on Twitter. My handle is Joeyverse, JOEYVERSE. I post news updates on Facebook, and same handle there. Otherwise, you can get all of this information and more at joeyverse.com.
Excellent. Cool. Thank you so much, Joe.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You've already taken too long, Gelfling. Hurry!
At last, the crystal calls. It is time to return to the castle.
The crystal calls! To the crystal chamber!
So that's all the time I have for this episode of Trial by Stone. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/darkcrystalpodcast. We're also on Twitter at darkcrystalpod and on Instagram at darkcrystalpodcast. If you like the podcast and you think that others would love it too, then please spread the word about it. And if you can write a review on Apple Podcasts or even on Facebook, Greatly appreciate it. And if you're actually watching this on video on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and hit the subscribe button, and then also hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos from Trial by Stone. Thank you all so much, and stay tuned for the next episode of Trial by Stone.